fell into a paroxysm of spiteful tears, and exclaimed that she was a wretched, neglected, miserable castaway. 'I hate everybody,' said Miss Squeers, 'and I wish that everybody was dead, that I do.' 'Dear, dear,' said Miss Price, quite moved by this avowal of misanthropical sentiments. 'You're not serious, I am sure.' 'Yes, I am,' rejoined Miss Squeers, tying tight knots in her pocket handkerchief, and clenching her teeth, 'and I wish I was dead too. There!' 'Oh, you'll think very differently in another 5 minutes,' said Matilda. 'How much better to take him into favour again, than to hurt yourself by going on in that way. Wouldn't it be much nicer, now, to have him all to yourself on good terms, in a company keeping, love making, pleasant sort of manner?' 'I don't know but what it would,' sobbed Miss Squeers. 'Oh, 'Tilda, how could you have acted so mean and dishonourable? I wouldn't have believed it of you if anybody had told me.' 'Hey day!' exclaimed Miss Price, giggling. 'One would suppose I had been murdering somebody at least.' 'Very nigh as bad,' said Miss Squeers, passionately. 'And all this because I happen to have enough of good looks to make people civil to me!' cried Miss Price. 'Persons don't make their own faces, and it's no more my fault if mine is a good one, than it is other people's fault if theirs is a bad one. Hold your tongue!' shrieked Miss Squeers, in her shrillest tone, 'or you'll make me slap you, 'Tilda, and afterwards I shall be sorry for it.' It is needless to say that by this time the temper of each young lady was in some slight degree affected by the tone of her conversation, and that a dash of personality was infused into the altercation in consequence. Indeed, the quarrel, from slight beginnings, rose to a considerable height, and was assuming a very violent complexion, when both parties, falling into a great passion of tears, exclaimed simultaneously that they had never thought of being spoken to in that way; which exclamation, leading to a remonstrance, gradually brought on an explanation, and the upshot was that they fell into each other's arms and vowed eternal friendship, the occasion in question making the 52nd time of repeating the same impressive ceremony within a 12-month. Perfect amicability being thus restored, a dialogue naturally ensued upon the number and nature of the garments which would be indispensable for Miss Price's entrance into the holy state of matrimony, when Miss Squeers clearly showed that a great many more than the miller could or would afford were absolutely necessary, and could not decently be dispensed with. The young lady then, by an easy digression, led the discourse to her own wardrobe, and, after recounting its principal beauties at some length, took her friend upstairs to make inspection thereof. The treasures of 2 drawers and a closet having been displayed, and all the smaller articles tried on, it was time for Miss Price to return home; and as she had been in raptures with all the frocks, and had been stricken quite dumb with admiration of a new pink scarf, Miss Squeers said in high good humour that she would walk part of the way with her, for the pleasure of her company; and off they went together, Miss Squeers dilating as they walked along upon her father's accomplishments, and multiplying his income by 10, to give her friend some faint notion of the vast importance and superiority of her family. It happened that that particular time, comprising the short daily interval which was suffered to elapse between what was pleasantly called the dinner of Mr. Squeers's pupils, and their return to the pursuit of useful knowledge, was precisely the hour when Nicholas was accustomed to issue forth for a melancholy walk, and to brood, as he sauntered listlessly through the village, upon his miserable lot. Miss Squeers knew this perfectly well, but had perhaps forgotten it, for when she caught sight of that young gentleman advancing towards them, she evinced many symptoms of surprise and consternation, and assured her friend that she felt fit to drop into the earth. 'Shall we turn back, or run into a cottage?' asked Miss Price. 'He don't see us yet.' 'No, 'Tilda,' replied Miss Squeers. 'It's my duty to go through with it, and I will.' As Miss Squeers said this, in the tone of one who has made a high moral resolution, and was besides taken with 1 or 2 chokes and catchings of breath, indicative of feelings at a high pressure, her friend made no further remark, and they bore straight down upon Nicholas, who, walking with his eyes bent upon the ground, was not aware of their approach until they were close upon him; otherwise he might perhaps have taken shelter himself. 'Good morning,' said Nicholas, bowing and passing by. 'He's going,' murmured Miss Squeers. 'I shall choke, 'Tilda.' 'Come back, Mr. Nickleby, do!' cried Miss Price, affecting alarm at her friend's threat. but really actuated by a malicious wish to hear what Nicholas would say. 'Come back, Mr. Nickleby.' Mr. Nickleby came back, and looked as confused as might be, as he inquired whether the ladies had any commands for him. 'Don't stop to talk,' urged Miss Price hastily, 'but support her on the other side. How do you feel now, dear?' 'Better,' sighed Miss Squeers, laying a beaver bonnet of a reddish brown with a green veil attached on Mr. Nickleby's shoulder. 'This foolish faintness.' 'Don't call it foolish, dear,' said Miss Price, her bright eye dancing with merriment as she saw the perplexity of Nicholas. 'You have no reason to be ashamed of it. It's those who are too proud to come round again without all this to do, that ought to be ashamed.' 'You are resolved to fix it upon me, I see,' said Nicholas, smiling, 'although I told you last night it was not my fault.' 'There! He says it was not his fault, my dear,' remarked the wicked Miss Price. 'Perhaps you were too jealous, or too hasty with him. He says it was not his fault. You hear? I think that's apology enough.' 'You will not understand me,' said Nicholas. 'Pray dispense with this jesting, for I have no time, and really no inclination, to be the subject or promoter of mirth just now.' 'What do you mean?' asked Miss Price, affecting amazement. 'Don't ask him, 'Tilda,' cried Miss Squeers. 'I forgive him.' 'Dear me,' said Nicholas, as the brown bonnet went down on his shoulder again, 'this is more serious than I supposed. Allow me. Will you have the goodness to hear me speak?' Here he raised up the brown bonnet, and regarding with the most unfeigned astonishment a look of tender reproach from Miss Squeers, shrunk back a few paces to be out of the reach of the fair burden, and went on to say: 'I am very sorry, truly and sincerely sorry, for having been the cause of any difference among you last night. I reproach myself most bitterly for having been so unfortunate as to cause the dissension that occurred, although I did so, I assure you, most unwittingly and heedlessly.' 'Well, that's not all you've got to say, surely?' exclaimed Miss Price, as Nicholas paused. 'I fear there is something more,' stammered Nicholas with a half smile, and looking towards Miss Squeers. 'It's a most awkward thing to say, but the very mention of such a supposition makes one look like a puppy. Still, may I ask if that lady supposes that I entertain any... in short, does she think that I am in love with her?' 'Delightful embarrassment,' thought Miss Squeers. 'I've brought him to it at last. Answer for me, dear,' she whispered to her friend. 'Does she think so?' rejoined Miss Price. 'Of course she does.' 'She does!' exclaimed Nicholas, with such energy of utterance as might have been for a moment mistaken for rapture. 'Certainly,' replied Miss Price. 'If Mr. Nickleby has doubted that, 'Tilda,' said the blushing Miss Squeers in soft accents, 'he may set his mind at rest. His sentiments are reciprocal.' 'Stop!' cried Nicholas, hurriedly. 'Pray hear me. This is the grossest and wildest delusion, the completest and most signal mistake that ever human being laboured under or committed. I have scarcely seen the young lady half a dozen times, but if I had seen her 60 times, or am destined to see her 60,000, it would be and will be precisely the same. I have not one thought, wish, or hope connected with her, unless it be, and I say this not to hurt her feelings, but to impress her with the real state of my own, unless it be the one object dear to my heart as life itself, of being one day able to turn my back upon this accursed place, never to set foot in it again, or think of it, even think of it, but with loathing and disgust.' With this particularly plain and straightforward declaration, which he made with all the vehemence that his indignant and excited feelings could bring to bear upon it, Nicholas, waiting to hear no more, retreated. But poor Miss Squeers! Her anger, rage, and vexation, the rapid succession of bitter and passionate feelings that whirled through her mind, are not to be described. Refused by a teacher, picked up by advertisement at an annual salary of £5, payable at indefinite periods, and found in food and lodging like the very boys themselves, and this too in the presence of a little chit of a miller's daughter of 18, who was going to be married in 3 weeks' time to a man who had gone down on his very knees to ask her. She could have choked in right good earnest at the thought of being so humbled. But there was one thing clear in the midst of her mortification.